A big congrats on Journey to Royal, a World War II rescue mission. I learned a lot and was entertained a lot too. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you,
Manny. That's
Manny.
wonderful.
Oh, you guys are so welcome. So let's begin with you, Miss Mariana. As producer of the film, when you first saw the script that Chris here wrote, what did you think? And was that how you got interested in producing the movie?
Well, Chris will tell you a little bit more about why he started the film, but the reason that I came on board was Chris had told me about this group, this rescue squadron of which his great uncle was a part. And when he was describing all the rescue missions that they went on and told me that they actually did this, they flew into the most dangerous theaters of the South Pacific without any ammunition. Their planes had been modified. The machine guns had been removed so that they could make room for the rescued people that they would be bringing aboard. So these young guys were flying into the most dangerous territory, enemy waters, for the sole purpose of saving lives, not for taking them. And when I heard that, when I think about it to this day, I still get chills. To know the self-sacrifice that these people were willing to contribute in order to save other people's lives. And I said, I have to be a part of this. I have to make sure that this legacy is preserved for future generations, that people know about these extraordinary feats of heroism that these guys actually were a part of.
Oh, and Mr. Christopher, this is your first full feature film, right? And you have extensive experience with visual effects from films such as Jumper, The Final Destination. What made you want to write and direct this film, Journey to Royal? I mean, tell us the genesis.
Sure. Well, so many people today can relate to a family member who's not there anymore because they were lost in a conflict, whether it was Vietnam or World War II or, even contemporary conflicts. And for my family, my great uncle, there was an obvious absence that carried on generationally. We felt it in my generation that he wasn't there. And so I felt that, as I learned about why he wasn't there, that he had died in a rescue operation in the South Pacific in World War II, I started to become interested in what were the circumstances that took this person from us. And so as I began to learn more about what he did and his entire squadron by extension, it was just moving in a way that demanded attention. And so as I began to investigate it, I thought, well, I'll write a narrative feature film about this. And then we had a research interview with the last surviving member of Royal's crew. And when we interviewed him, it became vividly clear that the story was the veterans, not some fictionalized account. And so that shifted the entire focus from this sort of, again, fictionalized account to pinpoint directly on the literal stories that these veterans had to tell.
Is that why the movie is hybrid? I mean, it's part documentary and part narrative. Is that why how you chose that creative technique?
Yeah, the impact that we felt when we sat in the room with these veterans. I mean, Mariana talks about feeling the hair stand up and the goosebumps, and documentaries, they're so compelling as they are, but we wanted to add another level of immersion for the audience so that they could feel as much of that fear or excitement or exhilaration in the process of these rescues that we felt in the room with these people. So we felt the best way to do that was to just sort of complement, kiss, if you will, the narrative and sort of bring it into this other realm and to try to do it as seamlessly as possible so that you're not necessarily consciously aware that, okay, we're shifting from the documentary part into the feature film part, but just that your senses are heightened and like, oh, we're in it now. This is what it feels like.
No, this is to both of you. I heard you guys shot parts of it in Palm Springs. Tell us more about that. Let's begin with Ms. Mariana.
We did. There is the Palm Springs Air Museum is a wonderful, wonderful place. If anybody is watching out there and they have not visited, I highly recommend it. They have warbirds, vintage warbirds there. They have so much information for people. It's such an educational place. And we were fortunate and privileged enough, really, to be able to shoot on a PBY Catalina that's housed there, and it's named Harriet's Chariot. And so our our hero crew from the PBY, what you see in the film is actually inside that actual vintage war.
Wow. Yeah.
So yes, I highly recommend the Palm Springs Air Museum. Get out there, get out there.
I love shooting I mean, you know, whenever I do movies, I review films like Dunkirk. I go there to, you know, for the whole effect, right? What about the water scenes? I'm very, very impressed with the water scenes. Tell us more about that, Christopher.
Well, like Mariana said, our goal was to put our performers in as close to the circumstances as the actual veterans were in, so that they could feel the tactile nature of whether it was being on the open ocean or in the confined spaces of those cockpits. And we from the very beginning, we knew that we had to go out into the open ocean, because there's something very primal about being out there without this feeling of like, oh, well, we could just go to shore if there's a problem. You know, it adds to the performance. And not only that, it's very, I think, very challenging in from a visual effects standpoint to recreate the breadth and openness of the being actually out there. And the other thing is that when they're in those boats rocking on the ocean, you have to get out a certain amount from shore in order to get the kind of waves and wakes that you would normally get under those circumstances. So it all went to preserving as close to the fidelity of the veteran stories as possible, you know, and that's why we went out there. And it was certainly challenging, you know, seasickness, looking through the lens, and the motion of the camera not jiving with the motion of the feet. And, you know, spending days out there. I mean, it was certainly challenging, but I think everybody, in fact, at the end of the first day, we recognized, both Mariana and I recognized how challenging this was for everybody. And we said, look, if you guys want us to reduce the open ocean schedule, because we both recognize that this was challenging, we'll do that, but we want to take a vote. And if you want us to continue on as we planned, we will. If you guys feel that it's something that we need to reduce the schedule of, we will, but we're going to put it in your hands. And every person, to a man, said, we're not cutting this short. We're gonna pay due, and we're gonna do everything we have to make this work.
It's like going to battle yourself, right?
That's exactly what I was about to say, Manny. This group of gentlemen that we brought on board to play our heroes, from the moment that they met each other, they banded together like a band of brothers. It was such an impressive thing to see. And just to add on to what we were just talking about, being inside the PBY at the Palm Springs Air Museum, the vintage smells that you have in there, the textures of the metal, the steel, it really helped the actors find their way into character.
Yeah.
And as Chris was saying, on the open ocean, you know, a couple of our guys, and myself included, I have to be, you know, in terms of full disclosure, we had seasickness and we were down for the count for a while. But it was so impressive to see them just push through it and say, we want to be able to help you preserve this story and make sure that these veterans are not forgotten, and we're gonna just stick through it, like you said, as if it were in almost their own sort of battle.
And well, it's truly visually immersive, right? But like what Chris said, I also love the stories of your interviewees. Tell us more about that. How did you get them?
Well, we had to painstakingly go through declassified military reports and accident reports to find the different members of the squadrons, and that took years and years and years and years to do. It was quite the feat, and we're very, very proud of it. And Chris, do you want to jump in on what you had done?
Well, you know, we had a list of people that had been rescued from the PBY, and we knew who my great uncle's crew consisted of. So, you know, you have a hard copy paper list of these people, and what you have to realize is this is before internet. This is before extensive record keeping where you could just, Google somebody and the same day be in contact with them. And Mariana is an expert sleuth. She was able to find, I don't know how she did it. That's one of her amazing skills I'm always envious of. But because of that, we were able to finally track down these people. And then on top of that, they were gracious enough to share their stories with us and welcome us into their homes in many cases. And the families came together around this occasion. And so often at the end of the interview, they would thank us, which never failed to bring tears to our eyes, because we're the ones that were grateful that they were sharing. And yet these stories that these veterans had never been disclosed, because what we forget sometimes is what we're asking these people to relive on camera is sometimes some of the most traumatizing events of their lives. We're enthusiastic because we're there as an audience member to their story, and we come with this enthusiasm. Yeah. But very early on, both Mariana and I realized that there has to be another level of tact and grace when approaching these, because it became apparent that as they were telling their stories, it was like it happened last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're the heart of the film. I mean, they made me cry at the end. I was even a little wispy at the end, And I think the battle scenes and all that stuff is that, the brawn, if you may.
Sure.
But I do love that. Now, in your research of the film, Chris, what was your biggest discovery of Lieutenant Royal Stratton, of your great uncle?
The biggest discovery was that you make assumptions about a person, and so, but the universal love that the squadron members seemed to have for him, that wasn't the biggest discovery. I'll get to that in a second. But their affinity for him and recollection of him and ability to fill in the gaps, that was profound, because ultimately the goal for me as a family member and a filmmaker was to know my great uncle, to fill in that hole in our family. And by extension, to let the rest of my family who hadn't been alive during his short life know who he was, his daughter, his grandchildren, and things of that nature. So that was profoundly impactful to us. The biggest discovery wasn't so much specifically about Royal, but it was about his squadron and the vitally important turning points of the war that squadron participated in or was privy to witness, whether it be the pilot that actually replaced my great uncle delivered the surrender documents to the USS Missouri. And that's just a profoundly important aspect that we had no idea existed or was even within the realm of the scope of what that squadron had encountered. And the movie, as you know, is peppered with things like that, these encounters along the way, and they're major turning points of the war. I won't give them away here, but we were immeasurably moved. And the recollection of these veterans, to be able to recount them as if they'd happened last week and bring us along as if we were there. Mm-hmm. Mariana, one of Mariana's favorite people is Lyle Umenhofer, and he's one of the veterans, and Mariana might want to talk a little bit about how he welcomed us and shared with us, just opened the floodgates.
Do you remember Manny, Lyle Umenhofer? He was the survivor of the USS Indianapolis. He was describing being out on the open ocean for 5 days and just having, when we were in the room with him, we were there for hours and hours and hours that day, and he was describing just floating soundlessly, except for maybe a chopping of a wave, and just constantly 24 hours a day being butted, just being on his legs and his body being butted by sharks constantly for 5 days. Wow. And he was so soulful in his wanting us to know this story and make sure that it was preserved. And I remember when we were leaving, I was so moved, and I had literally fallen in love with him. And I said, Lyle, I'm coming back to take you out. We're going to go to the Descanso Gardens. That's what we're doing next week. And unfortunately, a few days after we left, he passed. And it was so heartbreaking to me. But on some strange level, I thought maybe he felt as if he had finally been able to tell his complete story to someone and trusted and knew that we would be the custodians of that story and protect it and make sure that it got out, because we made a promise to every one of these veterans that their service and their dedication and their sacrifice would never be forgotten. And if there's anything that I personally want people to take away from this film, it's the knowledge that when people come together and unite, they can overcome insurmountable odds. They can overcome and triumph over the greatest forces that may be against them. And it's proven over and over and over in our film, firsthand from the people who actually experience these events, that is the case, that unification, despite any differences, political background, any belief system, despite all of that, if you band together to triumph over an adversary, a common adversary, it is possible. And we've been able to be a privileged audience ourselves in listening to the stories of these guys. And I also wanted to just mention briefly, if I may, what moved me so much about these people when we were talking to them, the sense of humility that they had. It was 100% across the board, Manny. Not one of these guys wanted to speak to us from a place of, look how great I am. Look what I did to save lives. It was the purest sense of humility and grace that I think I've ever experienced. They just were so humble in their description of what they did, and it was just it was their service. It was what they were chosen to do, and they did it to the best of their ability. And for me, in this day and age right now, where everybody's self-worth is really kind of dependent upon how many likes you get or how many followers you get or something like that, to see the greatest generation, members of the greatest generation, and these other people who don't, who never really had to experience this kind of new way of thinking. It was just such a pure sense of self-sacrifice that it was remarkable to me.
You hit all the right words: unity, self-sacrifice, and that's why I think it's still relevant to this day, right? Do you agree, Christopher?
Absolutely. I mean, as we all know, we're in the middle of a global crisis. And we need to, the lessons of the greatest generation and the veterans in this story speaks to the mettle that we need to put on, the armor we need to put on today to fight the common foe of the virus and to put aside our political and ideological differences. Because like Mariana had said, it's that unification of spirit and effort that is going to allow us to persevere over this thing we're encountering. So that's another main takeaway that I hope people get from this picture, is that unification that helped them through the Great Depression, the World War II, and allowed us to become the world we are today. We need to pick back up that mantle of the greatest generation and go forward courageously in their footsteps. That's what's going to help us overcome as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. So Mariana, tell our viewers, if they want to purchase it or watch Journey to Royal, how do they do that?
Absolutely. It's being released February 2nd on video on demand and also on Blu-ray and DVD. The video on demand platforms are Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, Fandango Now, places like that, Vudu, Hulu. And then any major online retailer like Amazon will have the DVD and Blu-ray to purchase as well.
Are you gonna give Palm Springs Air Museum some copies to sell?
Oh, we're going to give them so much stuff. And that's another thing. We had our one and only test screening at the Palm Springs Air Museum. And
thanks for inviting me, by the way.
Oh, no.
Miss Mariana, I'm not going to let you go without talking about your fantastic philanthropic efforts. Tell us more about that, please.
What are you talking about? My the nonprofits that I'm
Yes,
associated
yes,
with?
yes, yes.
Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to plug them. Actually, one of the ones that I'm most proud of is Save the Chimps, and we are the world's largest chimpanzee sanctuary, and we house. I think at this point now we're over 350 chimpanzees that have been retired from the space research program and the entertainment and pet trades and zoos and circuses. And so there are 12 well, there are 5-acre islands that are in Florida that have absolutely no bars, no fences. They're just separated by waterways. And the chimp families are allowed to live as close to their natural habitat as possible on these islands. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And Chris and I actually, we had the privilege of going along on one of the last migrations when we were moving a family of chimps from a laboratory in New Mexico that had been closed to the sanctuary. And so we were there to see them be released onto these islands again. It was, to this day, it's one of the most rarefied experiences I've ever had. And then there's also Dreamcatcher Wild Horse and Burro Sanctuary up in Northern California, and Rex and Friends Foundation, which is a foundation that provides musical education to those who are blind or autistic. And I don't want to miss anybody. And then the $10 club, the $10 club. This is a really kind of a neat thing. It's a group of people, and we all donate just $10 a month, and all of that money gets pooled, and it goes into funding a specific poverty alleviation program somewhere in a developing nation. And so anybody can join that. It's the $10club.org. And we'd love to have you come on board with that. So,
oh, of course. I was gonna say I love your pure heart, Miss Mariana. So let me know if you need anything. I'm there. Okay,
Manny, thank you.
you guys are so welcome. It's all about passion. Just like the film, it's a big, big, big passionate movie. A big congrats again to Journey to Royal. It's a well-made look at a human story about loving our country. So great, 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 great job again.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you so much.